Thank you for joining. This is Live with Miami's Community News. And today we're going to be talking about mosquitoes. Our guest today is Michael Mut from the Miami-Dade County Mosquito Control Division. Thank you for being here, Michael.
Thanks for having us, Michael.
Okay, so first I want to thank, University Credit Union, Michael Welch and the team out there. 75 years, there we go, with their logo up top. Need some help, they'd be glad to help you out. Again, Michael Welch, thank you for your help. So we have this storm that's stirring up things, all right?
Yes.
And it's moving.
Hurricane Ian.
Right. And it's moving water around and it's moving maybe mosquitoes around. Tell us the effect that weather events like this, whether it's a tornado or a hurricane or just big winds, has on the effect for mosquitoes and their larvae.
A very timely question, Michael. Thank you for asking it. Well, there's several ways that tropical cyclones affect or can affect mosquitoes. And one of the obvious ones, one of the really important ones is the amount of water that's going to fall on South Florida is going to lead eventually to more mosquitoes. That is because mosquitoes rely on water to breed. They live 3/4 of their life cycle in water. So now that we know that there's going to be a lot of rainfall, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for mosquitoes to breed. But also, we got to keep in mind that some mosquito species don't fly very well. And so a lot of the wind is going to serve to actually blow them away. So it could be a positive,
But if it blows them away, don't new ones come in to get blown away from somewhere else?
Definitely. But that could take several days for it to take effect.
So let's say the storm is gone. Today's Monday, right? Let's say Wednesday afternoon, Thursday morning, the storm is gone. What can people do at their homes to limit the amount of larva hatching?
The most important thing that folks can do at home is to check their yard carefully to see if there's any standing water that's accumulated in pots, planters, old tires, anything like that can be used that can collect the water, like tarps. Make sure that there's no standing water left around.
So often we sort of poo-poo it. Oh, it's only a little bit of water. But if there's an old bottom of a flower pot, all right.
Yeah, it doesn't take much.
And it's about this big.
Right.
And
that's enough.
And how many eggs might just be laid in there and then hatched?
There's no telling. What I can tell you is that mosquitoes only need an ounce of water. That is, just about enough that can accumulate in a bottle cap. That's enough for them to carry through their life cycle.
And how old are mosquitoes?
Mosquitoes are
how long they've been in nature?
Tens of millions. In fact, some estimates vary as high as hundreds of millions of years.
And they've evolved.
Yes, they have.
Very well.
Very, very
and they've
resourceful.
Managed to make it through.
Yes.
Right. So, and lots of times people have the connection to mosquitoes. Oh, it's just bothersome. All right. They may get bit. They go like this, and there's some mosquitoes out. So let's spray a little bit.
Unfortunately, that there's actually the aspect that they can transmit diseases, because what happens is when a mosquito bites a human, they transfer some saliva. They're not just taking your blood, but they're injecting saliva into you. So there's that transference of fluids, and that's how viruses such as dengue, West Nile, chikungunya, Zika, that's how it gets from one mosquito to another, from one human to another. So there is that threat of mosquito-borne illness.
So now back to our weather changes. All right. So this is September, almost October. All right. But in a month or so, it's going to be a little bit cooler. All right.
Not much cooler.
All right.
That's the thing.
But what happens in the cycle of the life of mosquito during the seasons?
Well, it really just accelerates or slows down depending on the heat and depending on the amount of moisture that's available. Mosquitoes, they rely, as I mentioned, they rely on heat, they rely on moisture. But if the weather cools down, that tends to, it doesn't exactly wipe them away out of the map. There is not going to be a marked difference between this week and next week, or this month and next month, simply because the temperature difference here in South Florida doesn't really vary between summer and fall. So that's the important thing to keep in mind, is that they're not going to go away, sadly.
So most people, what they're concerned about is the uncomfortableness of getting bit. What sort of products can we apply to our bodies, all right, so that if we're going out, all right, that we can help protect us against being bitten?
That's a good question. Really, people should be looking out for mosquito repellents that contain DEET, picaridin, oil of lemon eucalyptus if they're into more natural sorts of remedies, or something called IR 3535, which is the active ingredient in the Skin So Soft Avon brand. So that's an EPA registered repellent is what we like to say.
In the repellent that the county uses in the trucks, which I understand have been out not too long ago. I think I heard they were out.
Yeah, they were out last night. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
All right. What sort of repellent does the county use, and is that same product available to the public?
Well,
and the purpose of that spray?
I think better said, what we're using is a pesticide. It's products that are used to eliminate, not just repel mosquitoes. Last night, for example, we use a product called BTI, and that's shorthand for Bacillus thuringiensis israeliensis. That's the Latin name for a bacteria.
Pretty fancy words for us Southerners down here.
It is, and it took me years to really get that pronunciation right.
You sound like you know what you're doing too.
Yeah, I fooled you, buddy.
Yes.
No. So BTI is essentially a bacteria that only kills mosquito and black fly larvae, and it was sort of discovered by accident. But what we do is we take spores from that bacteria, we mix it with water, and we spray it in a column of essentially it's a turbine that sprays this fine mist into the air, and it comes down. And it settles over people's houses and over vegetation, and it gets into any standing water that's found in people's neighborhoods. So that's really the most that's the application that we do most frequently here. And we call that larviciding. So that's eliminating mosquito larvae.
The trucks last night, what areas did they do, and what sort of quantity? What square miles? Maybe you do it like that. How do you measure that?
I believe last night we were in the port of Miami primarily, and in some of the Miami Beach islands, if I'm not mistaken. And so I'm not really sure of the square mileage, but we're looking at 10, 12 square block areas that we target at any given point.
And how do you determine what areas to target?
That's a good question. Essentially, we rely on the data that we are extracting from our mosquito traps. There's about 320 different traps that we've laid out throughout the county, and we're checking these traps every week. What we're looking for is the number of mosquitoes that are in the traps. We're looking for the species. We're also looking for the gender, and we're getting these mosquitoes, and we're sending them off to be tested to see if there's a presence of disease in them.
So when you set out traps, if some trap maybe get, what's an average number that any trap may get in a week?
It really depends, either from 10 or 12 to 10 or 12,000.
So
it could really vary.
If all of a sudden you have this one area and it's 4 times what it was the week before,
that's a concern. That's a
so
problem.
You say we need to watch this, right? Or it's be able.
Well, we need to send a truck. That's what we do. We know the area where the trap is located. So what we'll do is we'll send a truck to spray the 10 or 12 block area that I mentioned before.
So if somebody calls up and say, "Listen, we got a big mosquito problem out here," do you know most of the time that that's about to occur?
Well, we can't really tell. I mean, we get a pretty good idea from our traps, but it really doesn't. We don't know until we know. That's one little cliche that we like to throw around. But what we do is we not just rely on the data, but we rely on resident complaints. Because if we see that there's a cluster of complaints in a certain neighborhood, we know that's a pretty good indicator that there's a problem there.
And then typically after you've proven that area, by however you get to that evidence, right, and you've arrived at the conclusion there's a problem there, typically how long does it take before there's a truck goes out to try to resolve it?
Well, what we do first is we send an inspector to the resident. We send an inspector to the resident or the residents or the business that reported the problem. So the inspector is sort of our boots on the ground, our eyes and ears. So he's able to see if there's any breeding. They do something called a landing rate count, which is essentially just kind of the inspector sticks his arms out and he counts the number of mosquitoes that lands on his arms in a minute or so. And so that then allows us to take further steps, such as the adulticiding.
And probably one of our most exciting pictures was you sticking your hand into a clear plastic box filled with mosquitoes.
Yes.
Right. Your right hand turned black.
You're never gonna let me live that down.
And it's like, how great is that? Well, I tell people, look at this guy. You want to know why his hand's black? Because it's filled with mosquitoes.
Hey, can we share a link to that video?
Yeah.
Andres, maybe a link to that previous video so people can see what we're talking about. But yeah, that's what Michael's referring to is we have mosquito cages that we use in our laboratory settings, and we raise mosquitoes. And these mosquitoes, they need something to eat. So what happens is we need human subjects to volunteer and put their arms in. And I've been known to do so, as Michael loves to point out every time that I'm on here. So what happens is we're allowing these mosquitoes to take a blood meal so that they can in turn lay eggs, and we can continue to keep the colony alive. And what we do with these mosquitoes is we're testing their ability to resist our pesticides. I'm not just charged with communicating on behalf of the county and the mosquito control division. We're also, as mosquito control division employees, we're charged with being good stewards of county resources. So we want to make sure that the pesticides that we're using in the public, they're actually working, because we certainly don't want to spray something, and use this pesticide and waste our money, our taxpayer monies, and we want to make sure that it's working.
So, and speaking about spraying, there's some people who are very green and that say, we don't want the mosquito spray because it's also going to hurt other flying critters. Tell us about that.
Well, that's a very sensitive question. It's a very good issue to be concerned about. However, we are using these pesticides in a very controlled setting. We're doing so during the time of day that not many insects are out. That is, we're out there between 2 and 5 a.m. each morning, so you don't have any pollinators out at that time. You have a lot of birds and insects that are underneath vegetation, which is protecting them from these pesticides. And the other thing is that the size of the droplet that we're using is very small. It only kills a mosquito. It's only big enough to kill a mosquito. It's not going to harm a moth that's flying around at that time. There are no butterflies out at that time. And these droplet sizes are so small that they essentially dissipate as soon as they hit the ground. And as soon as the sunlight hits them, any residual pesticides that are left around, they dissipate with the UV light.
And how long after you spray does it do its work?
Immediately. It kills them on contact. And, like I said, the droplet size doesn't have a very long half-life, so it doesn't last around, it doesn't linger, and it doesn't dissipate. It doesn't sink into the environment.
When we were kids, I think we all sort of fantasized, I'm going to chase the mosquito truck, and our parents are screaming, no, 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 no. So, but it's a spray that goes up right into the air. The tanks are there, and it gets distributed, and immediately comes down, kills the mosquitoes, and essentially dissipates immediately.
Right. The larvicide goes up a little higher into the air, 100 feet or so. The adulticide, that is the pesticides that we're targeting to kill the mosquito adults, they go just in a small concentrated cloud, and they kill on contact wherever we're driving through. So it's not anything, again, that lingers.
So there's a slogan that the Mosquito Control Division chants all the time. So why don't you tell us what that is?
We have a couple.
Okay,
one of them is drain and cover. And that refers to draining any standing water that you have laying around to prevent mosquitoes from breeding. And the cover refers to covering your skin with the repellent that we discussed, and also covering your skin with loose-fitting, long-sleeve clothing, pants, caps, socks, anything that limits your exposure.
And lots of times people, especially out in farm areas, they have outside vehicles or motorcycles, farm equipment, lawnmowers, they cover with a blue tarp. And typically that tarp is an extra foot long or two along the edge of it. And when it rains, the water sits there until somebody drains it.
Right.
That's people
the
don't like to
part.
do because it's turns ugly.
Yeah, it's labor intensive. Right, sure. But no, the mosquitoes, especially the container breeding ones, the invasive species that's called Aedes aegypti, they're experts at seeking out small amounts of water in these sorts of tarps, boat tarps that people use to cover their cars, tarps that people use to cover the holes in their ceilings, that sort of thing. Very, very useful for mosquitoes.
So, Michael, there are some mosquitoes that can lay eggs, not in water.
They lay it above the water.
They lay it above the water.
Yeah, those are those black salt marsh ones.
And the purpose of laying it above the water, because does it get activated when it gets wet?
Right, and now we're having something called a king tide today and Wednesday, which Wednesday will coincide with all this extra water that's going to be dumped on us. So that could spell trouble for us. That could be a boon for these mosquitoes, because what's going to happen is the water is going to rise considerably. It's going to get to these eggs that were laid on the mangrove roots, and you're going to have a mass emergence within 7 or 10 days.
So, and how long can they live outside of the water?
Mosquito eggs can last up to 5 years. In dry conditions, they could be activated, as long as 5 years from the time that they were laid. In some cases, depending on the species. But yeah, they're very resilient. Yeah, it is amazing.
So tell us about why at outside fish tanks we don't see many mosquitoes in that water.
Well, the simple reason is because fish tanks house fish, and fish love to eat mosquito larvae. It's a delicacy for them. It's not just some little flake that you're sprinkling over into them. It's something that's moving, something that's alive, and if I'm sure you've done quite a bit of fishing here as a native. You understand that if you put a little piece of bread onto a hook, you're not going to get the same amount of action as a cricket or a worm that's moving. So it's much more attractive, a delicacy to them.
My grandson, where's the live shrimp, Grandpa? I said, all right, I'll go get it.
Yeah.
So Tell us about the Fall Mosquito Awareness Tour.
So I'm glad you asked about that. Now, I'm not so sure about this Wednesday because of, again, all the rain that we're going to be having, but we're targeting some certain underserved areas. We partnered with the Miami-Dade Library System. Shout out to Miami-Dade Public Library System for taking care of us. So what we're doing is we're visiting certain libraries in the community. I was at Arcola Lakes, which is in Liberty City last week. My colleague was in South Miami. Hello, Monique. Shout out. And then I plan on being, weather permitting, in Aventura this Wednesday. Then we've got Coral Reef, Naranja, Pinecrest, and Miami Lakes that are on the schedule. And what we're doing is we're going out into the community. We're bringing mosquito control to the people. We're there to present in the libraries about mosquito control. We're there to talk about what people can do to protect themselves, and also a little bit about what we do as a mosquito control division to protect the residents of Miami-Dade County.
Let's talk about the life cycle and the locations where mosquitoes wind up living their lives. How far is it from the place that they were born?
They can be just 10 feet away from where they were born, or they can be in depending on the mosquito species 10 miles from where they were born. So the life cycle essentially takes between 7 to 10 days. An adult mosquito will lay their eggs either on the water or near the water, and within 2 or 3 days that mosquito egg will hatch, and then it'll have another essentially two phases in the water. They'll exist as larvae for 2 or 3 days. They're like little wigglers. They look like little worms that crawl around the water. All they're doing at that point is just eating and getting bigger. They'll molt about 3 or 4 times. We call them 4 instars. Essentially, they'll live as larvae for 2 or 3 days, and they'll turn into pupae. And from there, it's just a matter of, if you're familiar with the Eric Kale book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar. Well, the caterpillar phase at one point, that the caterpillar is the larvae,
yes,
and then it goes into the chrysalis phase, which is the pupal phase for the mosquito. And then they're not eating any longer. They're existing as tumblers, which look like little commas, and they're very, very pronounced in their movements. They're going through their final transformation from pupae into adult mosquitoes, and then that lasts for about 2 or 3 days. Then they'll emerge from the water, and they'll become adults, and they'll last between 2 weeks, depending on the species, a week if they're a male. The males, us males always get the worst end of it, right?
Females live longer.
Yes, they do. They will outlive us all us males.
Amen.
Right. But so essentially, it's the life cycle takes between 7 to 10 days from egg to adult, and then they can last anywhere between 1 to 3 weeks as adults when they've emerged.
So if some of those things hatch on your property, there's a strong likelihood they're going to be around there for their life cycle.
They're not going to go very far because they've evolved to know that their food sources are not very far from them.
And the inquiring minds want to know, well, what about forget hurricanes and cyclones, things like that, but what about winds? How do they not wind up getting blown away?
They do in many cases wind up getting blown away. The mosquito is a very small insect. It's not a very sturdy insect. The Aedes aegypti invasive species is not a very good flyer, so it's not going to do well in winds. And what we have seen is that you know how it is. Once the hurricane has moved through, it takes all of the bad weather with it. It becomes really sunny and really bright and really beautiful. Well, that sometimes happens with mosquitoes. The winds will blow the mosquitoes out. In the case of Irma, we expected to have a very busy very busy mosquito season in 2018, and it was one of our lowest. And that was because we realized afterwards that a lot of this water that fell onto the area served to wash away the eggs. So it was the hurricane. Yes, it was bad that there was damage and down trees and down power lines, and the most unfortunate were the lives that were lost, but it did blow the mosquitoes out of the area.
So mosquito that's lived hundreds of millions of years, do they know the difference between laying eggs in the lawn and the grass and laying eggs on leaves?
Yes, Michael, they do. They know better. They know that in some cases, they can identify that puddles don't last very long. So they're very choosy about which bodies of standing water they will lay their eggs on or near. And so they know, yes, they've evolved.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
Tiny little thing.
They're brilliant little creature.
A few months ago, we saw that some of the wonderful people who work for the mosquito control department have the mosquitoes, and they have a pin through them so we can look at them. What do you call that mounting?
We call that pinning.
Pinning.
Yes, and that's essentially it's a way to preserve the mosquito and display it so that we can have a reference and we can help educate others on the differences.
Do you have to do anything to the mosquito itself so it stays around?
I don't believe we do, but I'm not really sure because I'm just the I just work here.
So people can find out more about the Mosquito Control Division by doing what?
They can go to our website, miami-dade.gov/mosquito. They can also follow the division on social media at 305 Mosquito. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, and there's also a number of video content pieces that are on the county Miami-Dade TV channel, so they could find us there as well.
Okay. And so if somebody has if they're getting bitten up by mosquitoes, how can they report that?
Okay, the best way to do it is to use the website, miami-dade.gov/mosquito. There is a tab that you can request a mosquito inspection. They can also call our county call center, our 311 call center, by dialing 311. There are also a number of mobile apps for iPhone and for Android that you can download. There's a Miami-Dade Solid Waste, MDC Solid Waste. The MDC Solid Waste app allows you to request a mosquito inspection directly from your phone. So those are the three best ways, I think, Michael.
So it's a simple guy like myself, you can go right to the website, fill out the form, or then call 311 and let them fill out the form.
Right. You tell them, you give them a few simple details on your address, on essentially where you think the mosquito problem is happening. And within a day or two, we send a mosquito inspector out to your property.
That's amazing. And does the county do other than the traps, what other proactive things does the county do as far as for control of mosquitoes?
Well, there's the public education piece, which is this. They send people like me and my colleague Monique Spence out in the community to talk to people. We do communicate quite a bit with the press, and we've been able to get them to report on what it is we're doing and what residents can do to protect themselves. So there's that aspect of it.
So a couple of years ago, there was correct me if I have it wrong, the Zika outbreak and Wynwood and part of On the Beach.
Yeah, that was 6 years ago.
6 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Seemed like it was yesterday.
It does.
And for the uninitiated, they're saying it's only over there. I go, how do they know it's only over there?
Yeah.
How do you know it's only over there?
Well, the traps tell us that they're over there. And also we are very fortunate to have a strong relationship with the Florida Department of Health. They do tell us where there is a mosquito borne illness report. They, obviously because of privacy laws, we don't share this with the public, but we know where these people live. So we're able to go and treat the area around their homes to contain them, to contain the disease.
If somebody gets bit by a mosquito and there's a disease in it, how long does it take before they become somewhat symptomatic?
Well, we really don't like to comment on the disease as much as we do the vector, and it's really because that's what we do. We're experts on the mosquitoes, so we generally refer those sorts of questions to the Department of Health. But I can tell you that most people don't know that they have a disease. Most of these diseases, dengue, chikungunya, Zika, West Nile, most people are asymptomatic, so you don't even know that you have the virus in you. But so that's why it's important to protect yourself at all times from mosquito bites, so you avoid that altogether.
So that might be found because of some other reason.
Right.
They're going in and
usually it's a disease report that comes from the hospital system that goes to the state, and the state transmits that information to us.
So somebody might have something else going on, and when they're in there, they're going to say, "Hey, you got this other stuff that's happening."
Right. That happened a lot during the peak of the pandemic times, where people would go in because they thought that they had, they were dealing with COVID, but
Yes.
Essentially it was something like West Nile. And that year, 2020, we had a record number of West Nile cases here in the county, but it was a non-story because people were so, and rightly so, concerned with the coronavirus.
So right now, during mosquito season and all year, I get it that mosquitoes are out. But in particular, with this storm, with all the extra water, no matter how many mosquitoes go away, is the mosquito department predicting that there's going to be a whole bunch more mosquitoes in a week?
We don't like to make predictions generally, but the indications are that yes, if you're going to have more water falling on the county, that's usually going to mean that there's going to be more mosquitoes. So we're anticipating that there will be an increase, and we're definitely prepared for that.
So a homeowner, what can they do knowing that, hey, here's what's about to happen? The ground's going to be soaking wet, the puddles are going to be more than before, and the trees and everything is saturated. What can they do?
Well, I think the best thing that you can do now before the rains is to take some time to check your rain gutters. Make sure they're not clogged, because what happens is if they are clogged, the water is going to accumulate, and that's going to attract mosquitoes. But definitely take a moment to go through your yard and get rid of any items that could accumulate the water before it happens. And then after the storm is passed, after it's safe to come back outside, make sure you check your yard and try to find these little pockets of standing water and get rid of them.
There are some plants that collect water. What's the
You're,
name
you're
of
an
it?
expert on this,
Yes,
Mike.
yes,
Michael,
we no longer have them.
Yes, so
Bam, chop 'em.
bromeliads. So
Yes.
you didn't have to eliminate them. What you can do. So bromeliads are beautiful and easy to care of plants. I'm sure people
Yes.
are very familiar with them here in South Florida. But what happens is that their leaf structures they form like a little tank that collects the water. And so as we've said over and over on this broadcast, when you have standing water, when you have a water that's sitting around, it's going to attract mosquitoes. So what you have to do is make sure that you're treating the bromeliad with the larvicide BTI, the same product that we use in our trucks, is available commercially. You can go to any hardware store, you can go online and you can search mosquito bits. You can find they look like little cereal, like grape nuts. And I know I'm dating myself because I don't think this cereal exists anymore. But they look like little grains of little granules. And so what you do is you sprinkle these granules in your bromeliads, and you do this once a week or once every other week. And what happens is these are a slow release form of the BTI. So you're eliminating the mosquito before it even gets a chance to fly.
So when we have bromeliads in our yard, I used to get the hose and fill up the little things there.
Yeah.
Little did I know I was actually adding to the problem
Yeah.
of mosquitoes.
Well, that does the trick, because what you're doing is you're washing out the eggs, but unfortunately, you're also washing out the nutrients that the plant is counting on to stay healthy. So you may just be overwatering the plant in doing so. But what you can do in lieu of the BTI bits, just a little drop or two of vegetable oil will do the trick also. And if you're a fan of baking cookies or baking pizza at home, there's a nonstick spray. There a number of different commercial brands, but the spray that you use so that the food doesn't stick to your pan, a little bit of that on the surface of the water will also do the trick. And what you're doing is you're creating a little film of oil on the top of the water. It doesn't let the mosquito larvae breathe. So that does the trick as well.
Okay, one item that's slightly off subject. The county is going to announce publicly about a new vehicle that they got.
Yes,
right.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Yes.
So today at 4:00, we're proudly going to be unveiling the county's first electronic waste collection vehicle, and that'll be at the Stephen P. Clark Center. For anybody in the media that's listening or watching this broadcast, we invite you to come out and cover it. The mayor will be there. Our department director will be there. I believe Congresswoman Frederica Wilson will be also a guest. So it's a very, very big day for us in that this accounts for the first electronic vehicle that we're going to have out there that's going to be completely powered by the garbage that it is collecting. So it's very exciting.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing.
Very
when
innovating.
we think about Back to the Future, where they were throwing banana peels in the trunk.
Right.
And
Doc Brown.
Right. Think about
Garbage.
it. That's what's happening now, except for it's going through.
Where we're going, we aren't going to need any roads.
Yes. So again, so the one of the county facilities, the garbage goes in there. It's fired up. Great steam turbine engine. It powers 35,000 homes plus the plant. And now at night, you're going to be able to plug that truck in the morning it's going to be charged up.
Yes, sir.
That's an amazing cycle.
It's really a self-contained vehicle, and it's really the wave of the future. Renewables are where it's at and where we're going and where we have to go if we want to protect our environment. So today's a really proud day and a big step in that direction. To have this sort of vehicle in our fleet now is very exciting.
Well, maybe one day we'll catch you or the mayor driving that thing around town.
I don't have a CDL, but yes.
Michael,
I'd
thank
love
you
to.
so much.
Thank you, Michael.
Folks, thank you for joining us. Remember, stay safe out there. And again, this is Live with Miami's Community News.
Fight the bite, drain and cover.